Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Epstein. I'm an editorial assistant at CITE English Journal, and we're here today to talk about the upcoming article, The Fallacies of Open, Participatory Design, Infrastructuring, and the Pursuit of Radical Possibility, and the upcoming special issue coming out in June. And we're here with the authors of that article. Here they are.
Hi, I'm Stephanie West-Puckett. I am an assistant professor of writing and rhetoric at the University of Rhode Island in Kingston, Rhode Island. I'm also the director of first year writing there, and I've been a National Writing Project teacher consultant since 2007.
And I'm Christina Cantrill. I'm an associate director of national programs at the National Writing Project. I've had the great honor to work for the National Writing Project for many years, and I started with the Philadelphia Writing Project, and I'm based here in Philadelphia.
And I'm Anna Smith, and I'm currently an assistant professor at Illinois State University. And our final author on this was Mia Zamora. She can't join us today, but she's at the University of Bergen in Norway, and she's on a Fulbright scholar there.
All right. Thanks for introducing everyone. So the special issue is about connected learning, so let's jump right in. What benefits and challenges do you guys think connected learning has as a framework for teacher education research?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that I think connected learning provides us a framework for thinking about technology and teacher education, moving beyond sort of this idea of functional capacity, being able to use tools, being able to operate particular tech tools. It's not about that sort of fidelity. It's about the human connections enabled through technology and the benefit of those particular connections. What I see is that connected learning, because it has a basis in equity in education, that it brings that framework to teacher education and helps us think about technology use and issues of equity, or as some in the National Writing Project say, tequity. So thinking about those issues of critical issues of power that are mediated through technologies. I'll also say that I think one of the challenges that we face is that there's a lack of empirical research on connected learning and teacher education. We have quite a bit of research on how youth learn with technology and connected learning, interest-driven, passion-driven, shared interest, and the building of production-centered pathways for young people and youth. But I think this issue is really important because it does provide us some of the first collected empirical evidence about teacher learning and connected learning.
Sweet. So for that, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but can you guys go into a little bit about your article? Oh.
You're muted, Christina.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that. I think what's really I'm glad that Stephanie mentioned that piece of sort of thinking about teacher learning too in this context. And so the article really emerges from some work that we were doing together at the National Writing Project. So we were all participants in this work at the same time that we were co-facilitators and researchers, and we really took those sort of dual roles seriously as we were working on this project. The goal, we were between the summers of 2013 and 2017 is the span of time that this article takes place, and we started an open online opportunity for ourselves as educators. We called it a MOOC, but we very carefully talked about the fact that, the M meant massive impact, not necessarily massive numbers. The O was for open, and the other O was for online, and then the C was very much about collaboration and not about being a course. So we opened up this sort of MOOC for ourselves as teachers to really explore the connected learning framework. How can this support us in sort of thinking and talking and developing our practice? How can exploring that support us in designing for connected learning environments for the youth that we work with? And what would be important in that design? So it was really sort of a collaborative experience that we created together. And then as it unfolded, we really kept looking at, okay, what are we doing with this project? What are we learning here? And this article gets to sort of what one of the aspects of open that we often talked about sort of very freely, like we knew what we were talking about when we said open, but actually we realized it was much more complex than we thought from the beginning. And the complexity really drove us to think, to put together this piece. I want to open it up for my colleagues to add some more details, but that's just kind of the background for this article.
Great, thanks. Feel free to jump in, guys, if you want to add anything.
No, I think that's great. Maybe the only thing to add would be a little bit about how it functioned. So when we say openly networked and online, the teachers, educators from not just the U.S. but around the world were participants and could opt in and out in any way that they would want. So if they wanted to participate we had these make cycles, which were production centered rounds of making on a particular theme. And so they could opt in, right? And they could participate in that one and not the next one, or they could continue to do that one for the rest of the time. They could opt out. They could also participate in any forum that they would like. We started out I think we had a Google Plus community to start out with and a website kind of as a home base. People could put their own websites into a blog feed. And then a subgroup of people said, hey, we want to be doing this on Facebook. Some people started a Flickr community as well. And so it was this openly networked in that sense that teachers all over were doing this production-centered learning about connected learning. So we get this kind of mix between we were doing the thing that we were learning about, right?
Right.
So learn through doing, which is very much that National Writing Project model. So we're experiencing connected learning for ourselves. And so in that, when we say openly networked, it means that kind of openness was there to do those things.
Sweet. That's really interesting. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but how are you guys trying to problematize or go beyond the concept of an open online collaboration?
So I think I'll just continue there then, is that, and then you guys can jump in too. So that sounds like a lot of promise right there, that this was open, it was free, there was all this possibility, and possibility was happening, and it's true. In fact, our first piece of research that we did was looking at characterizing how teachers were learning. What does learning look like in this sort of setting? And our first piece really found that a primary way that teachers were learning with each other in a connected learning setting was through remixing each other's work and sending that out and remixing these different ways. So when we looked back, we started to think about, well, what was the facilitation of this space? And as we went back and looked at this, we really found that we wanted to push back a little bit on the connected learning principle of openly networked, thinking that it's necessary, but it just wasn't sufficient. We still had some critical issues that were propping up. Open, although it sounds free, and possibility, it also obfuscates what's happening and who's in charge and where to go and what to do. So there were people who expressed that kind of loss. It isn't free. There are, it sounds like it. There's some people participating in some ways and not in others. And there are in-groups that build up, right? So there are natural barriers. And so by thinking, oh, this is openly networked, everybody can do whatever they want, we weren't showing the way that open is also kind of a fallacy there. So I'll let you guys jump in, maybe some examples or something from that piece.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think as facilitators, we were really caught up with this promise of open and the idea that we've built this thing, we've thought about accessibility, we've thought about time and space and commitments and joining as you're able and doing as you're able. But then we found out in 2013, we really started to see this idea come alive that the participants felt sense of the MOOC was not necessarily open. And as Anna had said, they were thinking questions like, who's in charge? Who's running this? What does it mean? How is this put together? What are the goals? What are the outcomes? And so some
Can
of
I
these,
even say this?
yeah, right. And so we really started to think about from participants' perspectives, what messages were we sending? So, for example, one of the Make Cycle prompts in 2013 was to unintroduce yourself, to introduce yourself. And so we saw that a way of breaking down the introduction, of saying, hey, it doesn't matter where you are, how many times you've participated, if you're a writing project person, if not, if you're a teacher in formal or informal spaces, right? Tell us what you want us to know about you. So trying to get rid of some of those markers that typically come up in introductions. And so we thought this was a great way of kind of breaking down boundaries and creating additional connections, but that wasn't necessarily the felt sense of participants. They thought this is really confusing. If you want people to join in and just kind of jump in there, this sort of breaks down all the barriers. It deconstructs things in a way that, we don't even know what's going on anymore. So I think we started to see that tension between what we were anticipating in this open framework versus what the impact was. So we wanted to dig in a bit more with our research and find out, how was open being constructed in this MOOC and by whom? And I think that's what led us to thinking about open as not on or off binary, open closed, but on a continuum of open. So I'll stop and let you all jump in there.
And I was thinking that we talk about some of the Anna mentioned the facilitative moves that we felt supported this environment in being participatory, and we could see those happening. But then we started wondering, actually, which of those moves aren't quite getting us to shift, like some of those, which of those moves kind of can very easily maintain those same power dynamics, and which of those moves actually start to shift those power dynamics. Right. So what we get in the article is sort of, we get to start to uncover, actually what are some of the things that we see that really have been shifting things, and where can we see those differences? So one of the examples is this idea about coaching towards imperfection. So Anna mentioned these make cycles that we had, and that's how the MOOC was organized on a weekly basis. And there was different people who would lead a make cycle. They'd kind of design it and develop it and lead it and facilitate it during the week and kind of support it as it went. Right. And Joe Dillon, actually, one of our colleagues, developed a sort of coaching protocol to support those folks who were leading the make cycle in leading it. And he had this really wonderful way of sort of starting the coaching cycle by asking people, or telling people a story and then giving them a challenge. So one of the stories was the Kevin and Terry story, where Kevin and Terry spent a tremendous amount of time the first year perfecting the perfect make cycle. And then like 2 people did what they asked and everybody else did something else or did other things. So it was like this it really taught us very quickly, very at the beginning, like, oh, wait a minute. And they had spent hours working on this thing and everything. And it was just a really important learning experience. So we took that learning experience throughout the MOOC. And Joe facilitated that every time, brought that story, reminded us of that story every time. And then another piece was that a joke started emerging, like, everybody's kind of nervous to run a make cycle, and are we going to ruin this thing? Are we going to break it? So the challenge was like, if you can break the MOOC, break it, or, just try it, see what happens, see if you can break it. And I think that kind of spirit, we saw that like coaching towards things not being perfect actually supported some of the shifts that we were hoping to see in the way that people responded to each other and took up different kinds of work.
Right.
So as we go back to Stephanie's idea of this continuum, that kind of a facilitative move moved from coaching for participation and open participation toward what we started, borrowing from design architecture, talking about or design experience, talking about infrastructuring. This piece of where what we design is purposefully designed with gaps and holes for people who are participating in it to fill in and change it, but in a way that it is clear who it is that's making decisions and how they're making decisions. So in that continuum, we're thinking no longer is our goal really open for participatory participatory experience, but an infrastructuring strategies in our facilitation toward connection. That we're really looking for is people to be able to connect with each other in many different ways. We're not looking for just openness, but we're actually looking for people to connect with each other across those spaces. And those infrastructure strategies start to get us a little bit more at that.
Right.
We found in the research, yeah.
Anna, do you want to say a little bit about the Find 5 Fridays as another of those infrastructuring moves?
Sure. I can't remember what we called it, but Find 5 Friday was another way for people to not just participate across, it's called the Connected Learning MOOC, so the CL MOOC,
Right.
Participated across it, but then to start to share and build connections across each other's making across the space.
To curate relational infrastructures.
Ah, there we go. Curating relational infrastructures. So the idea being that at the on Fridays there would be this extra invitation, and this is something that cropped up in the first couple of years that wasn't planned, right? But just became a thing across the space. And this was an idea that people could then begin to curate things that they found. So it was Find 5 Fridays. So 5 finds, and finds could be anything, and the educators in the MOOC started to do this in different ways across the time and space. One participant, Sherry, for instance, invited others to find with her and created a space for them to find with them. And across these Find 5s, people were making those connections with each other's work in these deeper and richer ways than making by ourselves on our own. Right? So that's why it's called curating relational infrastructures, meaning they started to build that network or that infrastructure to support each other in these relationships in something as small as a little hashtag that was F5F, right? And that was this little practice that became, that moved across the space and has then since moved on to other people have taken it up in other spaces and used it since then in other teacher education spaces where they are inviting people to build their own network.
Right.
So again, it's not just hoping that it's open and it happens, but actually building that infrastructure for it to support its happening.
Yeah, and I think that Find 5 Friday example sort of gets at going back to the very first question about using connected learning as a framework for teacher education. There are a lot of tensions in that connected learning framework. And I think what we see in Find 5 Friday is that individual passion, that user learner interest, whether it's a teacher or a student, and shared interest and passions. How do you find others to go along with, particularly if you're a teacher, right? How do you find the folks who are interested in the same kinds of questions that you're interested in? And how do you go together? And what are ways that we as professional development designers can create these infrastructuring moves to help folks find their people, to find their community, to inquire, to practice inquiry, and to make the necessary changes in their classrooms to support 21st century learners.
Sweet. Thank you guys for your insight, and thanks for joining us. And be sure to look out for that special issue coming out on June 1st at citejournal.org.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.